Welcome back, everyone, to Echoes of Ihsan. We love taking these deep dives and sharing them with you all. Today, we're diving into something a bit different.
Yeah, a bit darker maybe.
That's a good way to put it. We're looking at descriptions of hell, as they're found in Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 4.
It's fascinating actually how these descriptions aren't just in one section or chapter. You find them kind of woven throughout the whole text, like right in the middle of chapters on things like righteousness or warnings against trials and tribulations or even inheritance laws or medicine.
It's almost like it's saying, hey, remember this ultimate consequence as you're going about your daily business. It just pops up in some unexpected places. It's a very interesting way to weave it all together. One of the most, impactful passages for me personally was Hadith 2308. It describes the grave as that first stage of the hereafter. And it says that the horror of the grave surpasses anything that we can even imagine in this world.
It really does make you stop and think, doesn't it? Like it just kind of shatters any idea that death is the end. Because it's not. It's a transition, a very real transition into a reality that's so much more intense and vivid than anything we can even wrap our minds around right now.
And those descriptions of hell itself they're not abstract at all. They're so vivid and tangible, almost like you could reach out and touch them. Like, take Hadith 2579. It says that the molar teeth of a disbeliever in hell will be as big as Mount Uhud.
Mount Uhud. That wasn't just any random mountain, was it?
Not at all.
A very specific image, a place of struggle, sacrifice. It was a pivotal battle in Islamic history. To use that mountain as a point of reference, it makes you realize the consequences of disbelief will be as monumental and impactful as that historical event. It's pretty powerful.
It makes me wonder about something. If our physical forms can be so dramatically altered in the hereafter, does that tell us something about how important it is to purify our hearts and our actions in this life? Before we get to that point.
It's a question that the text really makes you wrestle with. It's definitely not just there to scare us. The Hadith is pushing us, challenging us to examine our intentions, our deeds, and the state of our hearts.
So then we get to the actual descriptions of the torments of hell, which, let's be honest, are pretty intense.
Yeah.
In Hadith 2581, it describes the drink of hell's inhabitants being like boiling oil, like the skin peeling off.
It's definitely not sugarcoating anything. I think that's intentional, right? To make us really grasp how serious it is. And the image of boiling oil isn't just random. It was a form of punishment back then in those times. So it was something people could relate to, something that would evoke real fear. So the Hadith is tapping into that visceral fear.
And there's this one Hadith, 2592. That always gets me because it's so, strange. It says that hell itself complains to Allah that parts of it are actually consuming other parts. The weird thought.
It's an image you don't forget. Even hellfire, this ultimate force of destruction, is still in constant torment. Like it can't even contain its own intensity.
That's a pretty powerful thought. It's kind of personifying hell to just drive home how utterly awful it is.
Yeah.
But Allah actually responds in that Hadith. Right?
Yeah, Allah allows hell to kind of breathe twice, once in the summer and once in the winter. And we experience those breaths as the extremes of heat and cold here in our world. So it's like even the worst heat wave we experience or the most bitter cold snap is just a tiny echo of the true power of hellfire.
That's heavy. So even hell, this incredibly vast and terrifying force, is completely under Allah's control.
Yeah.
Its very existence is just another display of his power.
Exactly. And despite all of the terrifying descriptions and this kind of overwhelming sense of intensity, there is hope in this text.
Right, like in Hadith 2578, which mentions that even giving a small amount in charity might be enough for Allah to save someone from the fire.
Right. It's like a lifeline. Even in the face of all this, there is hope. Allah's mercy is boundless. And even something that we might see as small can have a profound effect on our eternal fate. It's a constant reminder that no matter what, there's always a chance for redemption. Always.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Not at all. Not at all.
Even in the midst of these descriptions of hell, there's a message of hope, of possibility.
The descriptions aren't there to make us despair. They're there to motivate us, to turn back to Allah, to repent. It's like a wake-up call.
Yeah, like saying, hey, this is the reality. This is serious. What are you going to do about it?
Exactly. The choice is always ours. Always.
You've given us so much to think about. I feel like we've only scratched the surface of all this. What else does Sunan al Tirmidhi tell us about what hell is like and the actions that lead to it?
One thing that keeps coming up is the concept of fitna, trials and tribulations. It plays a huge role in understanding why there are these warnings about hell.
You know what? That's true. And it's not just external trials. It's also those internal struggles that we all face. The temptations that are part of everyday life.
Exactly. Like, look at Hadith 2256. It says that whoever comes to the door of the Sultan, he will suffer a fitna.
So basically, being close to power and wealth, that in itself can be a major trial.
It's a classic test. Will you use that power and influence for good, or will it corrupt you?
It's a reminder that even success and status, things that seem positive, can lead us astray if we're not careful.
It's about constantly remembering why we're here, what our ultimate purpose is, and surrounding ourselves with people who will help us stay grounded.
So it's about recognizing those temptations and actively fighting against them.
Right. Power and wealth can lead to arrogance, to greed. They can make you lose sight of what truly matters.
So how can we, as listeners, apply this to our lives? How do we navigate those temptations without compromising our values?
Right. Our spiritual journey isn't a solo mission. We need each other.
It makes sense. We need that support, that community to help us stay on the right path.
Absolutely. And that sense of community, that responsibility to each other, it's there in another hadith that deals with fitna, Hadith 2169. It says, when sinfulness becomes widespread and the people have the power to change it, but they don't, then they should expect punishment from Allah.
Wow. So we're not just responsible for our own actions, but we also have a responsibility to speak up when we see wrong being done. If we stay silent, we're part of the problem.
Exactly. We have to speak out against injustice.
So we have a duty to each other, a duty to try to build a more righteous society. And that's where nasiha comes in.
Yes. Giving sincere advice to other Muslims, it's essential.
In Hadith 1925, it describes how the Prophet Muhammad made his companions promise that they would establish prayer, give zakat, and give sincere advice to every Muslim.
It's about guiding each other towards what's right, towards actions that will benefit us in this life and the next. True nasiha comes from a place of genuine care, not from wanting to show off or benefit personally.
So even in this discussion about fitna and the potential for punishment, there's an emphasis on support and guidance.
It's about recognizing that we're connected. Our choices affect not only ourselves, but also those around us. We're on this journey together.
We've been talking about the external fitna, but you mentioned internal struggles as well. What does the text say about that?
Right. Remember Hadith 2518.
Refresh my memory.
The Prophet Muhammad said, indeed, a man may speak a word without thinking about it, and because of it, he will fall into the hellfire further than the distance between east and west.
Wow. So even seemingly insignificant things like careless words can have huge consequences.
It's a reminder to be mindful, to be present in our lives, to be aware of our thoughts, our words, and our actions. All of it matters.
So it's not just about avoiding the big sins, but also about purifying our intentions, striving for excellence in everything we do, cultivating a state of constant awareness.
Exactly. And it brings up a big question. What are the key takeaways from all these discussions? The descriptions of hell, the concept of fitna, the idea of righteousness. What does it all mean?
That's a big question. Maybe we need to take a moment to digest everything we've discussed so far before diving into those takeaways.
I think that's a good idea. Let's pause here and let these concepts sink in. When we come back, we'll explore how these teachings can help us lead more meaningful lives. So we're back, and I think it's really important to remember as we're talking about hell that these descriptions are not there just to scare us.
Right.
It's not about fear-mongering. It's about introspection. It's about change.
It's like holding up this mirror and saying, okay, this is the potential outcome, so what are you going to do about it?
Exactly. It's a prompt to examine our choices, to make sure we're living in a way that's pleasing to Allah.
Yeah.
It's not just about avoiding hellfire, but actively striving for paradise. And remember, this text is filled with practical advice on how to do that, how to live a righteous life.
Like how to be a good person.
Exactly. It talks about developing good character, being kind, fulfilling our obligations to Allah and to each other.
It's about putting that knowledge into action. It's not just theory, like that hadith we talked about earlier, about how charity might be enough to save someone from hellfire.
Right. Such a simple act, and yet it can have such an impact. It's a reminder that we should never, ever underestimate the value of even the smallest good deed.
Like a ripple effect.
Exactly. And that brings us to something else that's crucial. Striving for righteousness, it's not just about escaping punishment. It's about seeking nearness to Allah. It's about nurturing a heart that's full of love and gratitude and sincerity. It's about embodying the essence of Ihsan.
Ihsan. Can you remind our listeners what that concept is all about?
Of course. It's about worshiping Allah as if you see Him. And if you can't see Him, knowing that He sees you. That awareness, it should permeate everything we do.
It takes everything to another level.
It's the heart of sincere worship. It's bringing that consciousness of the divine into every aspect of our lives.
It's like an inner compass.
Exactly, guiding us towards what's right, what's pleasing to Allah. And it's fascinating how Sunan al Tirmidhi connects all of this back to those descriptions of hell.
Right.
Like, remember Hadith 2592, where hell complains to Allah about consuming itself?
Yeah, that one was powerful.
It's a vivid picture, but it's also a reminder of Allah's power. Even hellfire, with all its intensity, is subject to His will.
It's a pretty humbling thought. If hellfire fears Allah, shouldn't we be even more focused on earning His pleasure?
It puts things in perspective, doesn't it? We're tiny compared to His power, but we're still given this incredible gift of choice. We get to shape our own fate.
And that leads us back to the importance of those small actions.
Yeah.
Hadith 2578, the one about charity, possibly saving someone.
It's a testament to Allah's mercy. It encourages us to never, ever underestimate the power of doing good. Even small acts of kindness, a kind word, can make a difference.
Each act of righteousness is like planting a seed.
Exactly. And in the hereafter, we'll see what grows from those seeds.
So to sum it all up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
The descriptions of hell in Sunan al Tirmidhi, they are meant to make us think. They're powerful reminders. But there's also a message of hope, of Allah's mercy, the possibility of turning things around.
Like saying, the stakes are high, but the path is clear.
Exactly. And that's such an important message. Even when we're grappling with these ideas of hell and the consequences of our actions, we can't forget about Allah's love and mercy. That's what will guide us towards a life of meaning and purpose, towards eternal happiness.
So it's a reminder to never give up hope.
Never.
That even in the midst of these heavy topics, there's always a chance to turn back to Allah.
Always.
And Sunan al Tirmidhi gives us practical guidance on how to do that.
Absolutely. And it emphasizes that our journey isn't over. It's an ongoing process.
With ups and downs.
Of course.
Yeah.
There will be times when we feel close to Allah, times when we feel distant. But the important thing is to keep striving, never losing sight of the goal.
How do we do that? How do we stay on track, especially when we're struggling?
There's a beautiful hadith that speaks to this. Hadith 259:11. It says, "Whoever rejoices in his good deeds and grieves over his bad deeds, that is the believer."
So it's about recognizing our mistakes and celebrating our successes.
Exactly. It's about always trying to better ourselves, to purify our intentions.
It's a lifelong journey of learning and growing.
Absolutely. And even when we stumble, there's an opportunity to learn and grow. Remember the story of the man who repented after making a serious mistake in Hadith 2496?
Yeah, the one where he was so sincere in his repentance that Allah forgave him.
It shows us that it's never too late to turn back to Allah.
It's a powerful reminder, especially when we're thinking about the descriptions of hell and the consequences of our choices.
It's about hope, about redemption. It's knowing that no matter what, Allah's mercy is there. It should inspire us to turn away from sin, to ask for forgiveness, and to strive for paradise.
So even in these conversations about hell, there's an underlying message of hope and the possibility of change.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important concept highlighted in Sunan al Tirmidhi, preparing for death and the hereafter. Remember Hadith 2333?
Remind me.
It says, "Be in this world like a stranger or a passerby, and count yourself among the inhabitants of the grave."
It's like a reality check, a reminder that this life isn't forever.
It's about detaching from worldly pleasures and focusing on our eternal destination.
It shifts your whole perspective.
It makes you think about your priorities, your goals.
Yeah.
It encourages us to make the most of our time and to invest in things that will benefit us in the hereafter.
So it's not about rejecting this world, but living in it mindfully.
Exactly. Finding that balance between our worldly responsibilities and our preparation for the next life.
This has been a truly insightful look at hell, as described in Sunan al Tirmidhi. We've learned about hellfire, fitna, nasiha, ihsan. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think it's so important to remember in all of this talk about hell and punishment that the ultimate message is one of love and mercy.
Tell me more about that.
Well, Allah describes himself in the Quran as Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, the most compassionate and the most merciful. His mercy is all-encompassing. It's greater than his wrath.
So even when we're talking about hell, Allah's mercy is still present.
Absolutely. The descriptions of hell, the warnings against sin, they're actually an expression of his love. He wants what's best for us. He wants us to choose happiness.
Like a parent who disciplines their child.
Yeah.
It's not about anger, but about love.
Exactly. It's about guidance and protection. And I think it's vital to keep that in mind. The descriptions are there, the consequences are real, but it all comes down to Allah's love for us.
It's a powerful reminder.
And I think it's a beautiful note to end on. Remember, even as we delve into these topics, even as we face the reality of hellfire, we must never lose sight of Allah's infinite mercy and love. They are the light that will guide us towards a life of meaning and, ultimately, to eternal bliss.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. This journey through Sunan al Tirmidhi has been truly eye-opening.
I hope so. And may this knowledge help us all choose the path of righteousness. May it bring us closer to Allah's mercy and love.
Picking up where we left off, one thing that really stands out to me in Sunan al Tirmidhi is how much it emphasizes the idea of choice. Like, yeah, there are these intense descriptions of hell, the consequences of messing up, but there's also this constant thread of we have free will.
We have the power to decide our own fate.
Exactly. We're not just puppets. We get to choose between good and bad, and those choices, they really matter.
It's both, I don't know, inspiring and a little terrifying.
I know what you mean. It's like, on one hand, we have this amazing opportunity to rise above, to strive for paradise, but on the other hand, it's all on us. We're accountable.
Big time. And that's where the guidance in this text comes in, right? It's not just about scaring us with hell. It's like giving us this read map, showing us how to navigate life, how to make choices that are in line with our faith, choices that lead us towards Allah's mercy.
Right. It's like giving us the tools we need, the knowledge, so we can actually make those choices. Informed choices. Like, one hadith that really drove that home for me was 2592, the one where hell itself complains to Allah about how it's consuming itself.
Intense imagery. Even hellfire, this unstoppable force, is totally subject to Allah's will.
It really shows you the stakes, doesn't it? Like, if even hellfire fears Allah, shouldn't we be even more motivated to please him?
It's definitely a reality check. Reminds us that we're pretty small in the grand scheme of things. But even though we're small, we still have this amazing gift, the power to choose.
And that makes even the small things so important, like Hadith 2578, about how giving charity could be enough to save someone from hellfire.
Right. Even a little bit of good can go a long way. It's like this incredible testament to Allah's mercy. Don't underestimate the power of doing good, even if it seems small.
Kindness, charity, a good word. Every little bit counts.
Each one is like planting a seed, and those seeds will bear fruit in the hereafter.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
I think it's this. Yeah, the descriptions of hell are powerful, and they should make us reflect. But in the middle of all that, there's also this message of hope. Allah's mercy is limitless. And there's always a chance to turn things around, always a chance for redemption.
So even with those high stakes, the door to paradise is still open.
It is, and that's something beautiful to hold on to. As we think about hell and our choices, never forget about Allah's love and mercy. Those are the things that will light our way to a life of meaning and purpose, and in the end, to eternal happiness.
Thank you so much for taking us on this journey through Sunan al Tirmidhi. It's been an amazing experience, really thought-provoking. I hope our listeners have gained something valuable from it, something that will guide them on their own journeys.
I hope so too. May Allah give us all understanding and the strength to make the right choices, the choices that lead to His pleasure and to His mercy.